Ихнэр 9900 төгрөгөөр нэг сар сүлжээндээ хязгааргүй ярина гинүү. Тэгэд одоо би чам руу, аав руу, ээж рүү, хүүхдүүд рүү, найзууд руугаа бүтэн сарын турш хязгааргүй яриад байхад 9900 төгрөг төлөх юм уу? Дараа төсвөрт багц байж нэгжээр нэмэлт хэрэглээгээ хийж болно гэж хэлэх гээд байна да тэгэхээр. За бол тийм багц байх ямар ч боломж байхгүй. Одоо ч гэдэг үл нэртэйгэр нь арагчаагард манай галтгоонд хоол хийж байна гэж хэлчихэж.
Хосолсон төлбөрт хайбрид 9900 багц. Сүлжээндээ яриа хязгааргүй. Хайбрид 19900 багц. Сүлжээндээ яриа мессеж хязгааргүй. Бусад сүлжээнд 100 минут ярина.
Удахгүй утсаа лизингээр авна гэж боддоо.
Мобикон.
Сайн байцгаана хүн төлөвлөгчтэй. Өнөөдөр ороо манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Австралийн алдарт аялагч, Монгол улсын аялал жуулчлалын гадаад нүүр царай болсон ноён Тим Көүп оролцож байна. Hi.
Hello, good afternoon.
Tim, what is your feeling? You have been nominated to be represent Mongolia. What is that about?
Well, for me, it's a real honour and a privilege because I first came to Mongolia 15 years ago, and I was completely taken aback by the people, the hospitality, this incredible landscape that you have, but most importantly, this remarkable heritage that's remained unbroken largely in Mongolia. I fell in love with the nomadic culture and decided that I really wanted to experience it for myself.
What
and,
originally brought?
Well, I actually came here by bicycle.
Bicycle, okay.
My friend and I, we were 21 at the time. We both wanted to live an alternative kind of path in life. I quit my law degree. I was studying to be a lawyer in Australia.
Where?
In Canberra, in Australia.
Canberra, University, National University.
Yes, and I decided with my friend that we were going to ride bicycles across Russia and Siberia to Beijing. I had dreams of coming to know at that time Russian culture, Russian language. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to make a film. I had all these dreams, and I realised that I had to give up my studies. Problem was we didn't have any money, of course, but we had a budget of $2 every day, and it took us 14 months to ride from northwest Russia across the north, across Siberia. We went along the Baikal-Amursky Magistral, the BAM railway that goes to northern Lake Baikal, and then in August or September 2000, we arrived in Mongolia. And we thought that it was the end of the journey, only another 2 months to Beijing. But for me, it was the beginning of the rest of my life. And I've been coming here for 15 years.
What led you in Mongolia to decide so?
Well, for starters, when we arrived in Mongolia, I realised as we were pushing our bikes along these fairly miserable trails, from Ulaanbaatar we went south to Mandalgov and then back via Sanshan and eventually to China. But I realised on a bicycle we were trapped. We were trapped to where the roads could take us, and these incredible horsemen and horsewomen would just come galloping from over the horizon. They'd say hello, sometimes give us some adal or some adag or tadag or something, and then off we go. And they would just gallop off wherever they wanted. And I realised these people had an incredible connection to their landscape and lived in a world where there are no fences for thousands of kilometres, where they live in conditions from minus 40, 50 to plus 50, without thick brick walls like we have where I grew up in Australia.
Which city?
I grew up in the countryside east of Melbourne.
Yeah,
it's just a small farm. And this way of life was totally different for me. And I wanted to come back and really experience it for myself. I realised that you know, the first impression can be a very romantic one, but the people live a very, very hard life. And I thought that the only way to really appreciate that and honour their culture and share it with others would be to learn it firsthand.
Well, and you did in this unique book, Tим Көүп on the Trail of Genghis Khan. And this book was 1.5 years ago printed, right?
Yes.
And what made you to write this book? I mean, one thing you travel, the other thing you make a note, but you made a whole book, and damn good book. And I have seen a lot of good comments on that, including by many famous people as well. So please.
Yeah, well, I came to Mongolia in 2004 fairly naively. I had a dream that I wanted to ride a horse just like the Mongols once used to, from Mongolia to Hungary, to the Danube River, about 10,000 kilometres. I wanted to do it by horse because only by travelling on a horse could I hope to understand the culture and also connect with people. On the bicycle I was more like a tourist, an alien.
With that horse you understood more what kind of things they have gone through, what
Exactly.
mountains, rivers they had to go through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in a way I'm jealous. I like tourism, I like this, but however you made this, I think nobody have done it yet before. And you have gone through this where the Hunnu, we understand, go through from Mongolia, later on Turks, and all the way to Europe. So
Yes.
what was the feeling you...
Well, it started off as a dream and became something much bigger than I had ever dreamed of, actually. It started off with difficult times. On the 5th day of the journey, not far from Harhorine, my horses were stolen in the night, 2 of them, and I woke up very early, frightened and bewildered, angry, but luckily I found them, and this herder returned them to me, and he said this amazing Mongolian saying that a man on the steppe without friends is as narrow as a palm, and a man on the steppe with friends is as wide as the steppe. And that was from the very beginning, the moment when I realised I needed to...
You said the guy returned the horse?
He did.
He
yeah.
took the horse?
I don't know who stole them, doesn't really matter.
Okay, somebody had brought the horse back.
I found them in a
you
herd,
found- okay.
and there was a herder
Okay.
nearby. Yeah, and it didn't matter then who stole the horses. I realised that it was my fault. I went there with these preconceptions. I didn't take any note of the warnings about wolves and thieves and all these other things. And that lesson changed me from the beginning. It meant that I needed to reach out and make friends with people everywhere I went, even if they were very unfamiliar. So the journey was planned to take 18 months. It took almost 3.5 years. And during that time...
What do you mean? You were stopping there somewhere and flying back home and the flying continuing, or...?
Well, I remember just 3 months into the journey when I reached Western Mongolia, Ulfsheimog, and there was a very big dry area, 2 days almost without proper water for the horses. And that's when I started to realise the real achievement of the Mongolians and the other nomadic empires before them, because it's such an expedition just to survive and ride a horse through Mongolia, let alone another 8,000 kilometres all the way to Europe, and then to wage war and conquer and create empires.
So you went through Mongolia, then Kazakhstan?
Yes.
Have you gone through Russia and this small piece of land?
At that time the borders were closed, so I had to go to Western Mongolia, across into Kazakhstan, and then from Kazakhstan I travelled uninterrupted all the way across to the Caspian Sea, through Kalmykia, and then the Kuban steppe among the Cossacks, then Crimea, then Ukraine, and then I passed over the Carpathians and finished on the Danube. My naive first plan was that I could ride 5 days a week, 2 days rest, 20 kilometres a day. I would make Hungary in 18 months. Of course, it was much more complicated than that. When the winter hit in the end of 2004, it was the coldest winter in northeast Kazakhstan for 40 years. It was the beginning of a zhud.
So the same zhud they had these years we had also as well?
Similarly,
you went through Mongolia, then through Kazakhstan, and their names are similar. I mean, there's Altang, a lot Altang, you know. The Mongolian names are in the territory of current Kazakhstan. Have you seen any similarity in culture?
Very many similarities, and I remember there was a small village on the shores of Lake Balkhash and they believe there that Genghis Khan once stayed there with his soldiers on the north of the lake. And Balkhash Lake. And there's no evidence perhaps to suggest it's true in history. However, interestingly, there's a village, the village where I stayed was called Orta Dersim. And of course, the Kazakhs didn't know what that meant in Mongolian because it has a slightly different meaning in Kazakh. But Deris is, of course, what they call in Kazakh akshi, the big white grass.
Yes.
And from there, it's the narrowest point across Balkhash to the Semirechi, to the Seven Rivers region of Kazakhstan. And all along the way, there were stories told by villagers about the Mongols, about the Khans. I met the Naiman people near the Betpakdala, near the Starving Steppe. And of course, their history goes right back to the time that the Temujin's tribes were warring against the West, and they were pushed into Kazakhstan, and they still remember themselves as being, if you like, kind of Mongolian to a degree, even though they're now one of the Kazakh tribes. So there were connections all the way, and one of the really special ones I wanted to tell you before we go on. I was taught a very famous knot here on the second day of the journey. There was a Malchin just near Mongols, and he taught me this knot. And if I had a rope, I could show you. It's like this. And that knot was crucial for me. And when I arrived in Kazakhstan, they said, "How do you know this knot? It's the Kazakh knot." And then when I arrived in Kalmykia, they said, откуда ты знаешь вот этот узел? It's a Kalmyk knot.
Kalmyk knot.
And then the Tatars in Crimea said it's Tatar knot. And finally, I was in Hungary, only a few days from the finish of my journey, and a Hungarian horseman, he said, "I want to show you a special Hungarian knot." And he pulled the rope and showed the same one. And it was like one of symbolic of the many cultural similarities that still connect all these different steppe cultures, from the Magyars in Hungary to Tatars in Crimea, Kalmyks, all the tribes of the Kazakh
those
people.
This is the dealing with mostly nomads, moving probably, and also horses, this sort of note. And similarly, remember also the Brits, the seamen. The British seamen, they have similar note as well.
Similar note.
So it's a kind of thing that is easier to make and easier to how do you call it? Remake back.
Yes, that's particularly good for horses, the way in which they tie this knot.
You were talking about this dog on your journey, this one.
Yes.
Tell us about this dog.
So when I was in Kazakhstan in the beginning of that very cold winter, I was fortunate to be joined by a man called Asset, and he took pity on me. He saw me like this poor Australian boy who had no idea about what he was in for. Surely he thought, this poor Australian boy is going to freeze to death, the thieves are going to steal his horses, he might not even make it alive. And he said to me after 2 weeks...
You were alone on the trip?
I was alone, but he came with me for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks he said to me, "Tim, before I say goodbye, I need to give you a present. You need a friend on this long road. You need someone to protect you from wolves and thieves and keep you warm at night in the tent." And he gave me Tigan. And Tigan was this 6-month-old skinny little pup who I didn't think would survive more than maybe, a few weeks in winter. But after only one day with him, I actually called home to Australia on the satellite phone and discovered that our family dog had died the same day, a family dog of 15 years. And it was like a sign that this dog was meant to be my travelling partner. And Tigan, he like me, he had his own adventures, his own journey. He was stolen, he was almost eaten. He was taken from me. One of the Kazakh customs officials decided that he wanted him, so only if I gave Tigan to him as a gift would they let me pass at one stage. He was stolen even in Hungary at one point, but he survived. He even left lots of children along the route, and I'm really happy to say that after 1 year living in Hungary, I managed to take him to Australia.
So where is the dog now?
He's in Australia at home. My mother's looking after him right
Your
now.
mother, instead of you, you left the dog with your mother. Dog is a good friend, isn't he?
Yes.
Цаг хугацаа давтагдшгүй. Харин түүнийг яаж зөөлхөлснө бидний амжилт бүтээл аз жаргал бидний давтдаг. Дэлхийн мөрөөр гэрүүл өмгтөлдөө зарцуулах цагаа зөв зарцуулах ёстой. Олон ухаалаг болсоор байгаа та бүхэнд харагдчихэ. Харин энэ бүхэн надад үнэхээр их таалагдж байна.
Ухаалаг орон сууц. Cape Tower Apartment.
Again, come on. Come on, lad. Hey, no. Again? No! Why?
So let's go back to your, you went all the way to Hungary. And in Hungary, what kind of things that reminds them this nation many years ago was here in Mongolia?
Well, one of the things I wanted to say was that I think that for Europeans, even for Mongolians, the sheer size and scale of the Eurasian steppe is unimaginable unless you get on a horse and experience it. And every day the journey felt beyond my comprehension. You know, the Kazakhstan alone, it took me 14 months to cross. The Mongols, of course, back in the day when they had the staging posts with the horses, they say could travel in 2 or 3 weeks even, by galloping and changing horses constantly. And only when you travel in that distance you realise what an incredible achievement it was. And people in Europe today, like 800, 900 years ago, cannot comprehend the life that nomads live, how hard this landscape makes you. One of the things that struck me when I arrived in Hungary and Ukraine and arrived in small villages was also, by that stage, how developed my own mentality was, in my own mind, of the landscape. I'd been travelling for 3 years. I had a map in my mind of all of the geography. The people living in the villages who didn't have horses, their map of the world in their mind was about 20, 30 kilometres around their village. And it made me realise how sophisticated, how hardened, how, in a way, worldly the Mongolians must have been by the time they reached Europe. Now, when I arrived in Hungary, I knew, of course, that the ancestors of the Hungarians, the Magyars, and earlier than that, the Hunnu, the Hun people, they were horse people who'd come out of the steppe. The Magyars came from probably somewhere around Bashkiria in northern Kazakhstan, southern Siberia, back in the 9th century. But I wasn't sure, you know, how much nomadic memory there would be, because even when the Mongols arrived in the 13th century, of course, the Hungarians were settled peoples.
Already
they were
settled.
cultivated, they were Christians, they were living, working the land. And of course, for Hungary, it is perhaps right to say that the Mongol invasion was a bit of a tragedy, because unlike other parts of the Mongol Empire, the Mongols didn't remain and create a stable, prosperous state.
Yes.
They retreated and left Hungary in ruins. So I wasn't expecting a particularly friendly reception to be coming
you were right.
on the footsteps of Genghis Khan, but it wasn't true at all. The people met me there with incredible friendliness. They saw that my journey represented the journey of their own ancestors, and for them, time has passed, and it's like the conflicts of the past have kind of melted into insignificance compared to this brotherhood of nomadic nations. And the Magyar people, the Hungarians today that I met, feel themselves very close to the East, to the many different Turkic and even Mongolian peoples. And what I never expected was that I would be ridden together with horsemen all the way to the Danube. And I didn't have to put up my tent more than once or twice. Many of them were proud of the Hunu origins. They were practicing shamans who came out and did ceremonies, and there were others who were more proud of their Magyar backgrounds. But it was overwhelming. People came out everywhere to honour the journey because they felt like my journey had honoured them.
Well, in a way you were not necessarily representing Australia, but you were representing Mongolia with that journey. And in Hungary, wherever you were or you were crossing through, you were representing this country. And how difficult was it to represent in a way, willingly or not willingly, you are in that situation. They ask you about this, your journey.
Yeah, well, I did feel that I had to learn everything about nomadic society in Mongolia and then carry the flag of nomadic life of Mongolia all the way to the Danube, because nomadic life in places like Kazakhstan, Kalmykia, Crimea, Ukraine, it's been interrupted long ago. So there isn't the living nomadic life there that there is in Mongolia.
Either in Kalmykia?
And in Kalmykia, that was a remarkable experience, I have to say, because I met the Oirat Mongols in Uvsaymag, and they told me about, of course, their cousins who live far away on the Caspian Sea, the Kalmyks. And 14 months later I arrived there, and I arrived in this very small national park called Atsun-Huduk, I think, and it was a park for protecting the saiga, this antelope. I crossed there at about midnight. I stopped in a little izba, a little shack, and at about 1 o'clock in the morning I was sleeping. All these men in hunting uniforms and national park came in, and they were scientists, and they were Kalmyks, and I listened to them talk. I thought, that's Mongolian, and I looked down from my bed and got up, and we enjoyed some salty tsutitsa, and I showed them some video from the Oirat Mongols, and they said that, wow, those Oirat Mongols in Mongolia really speak pure Mongolian. They were professors from the university, and that was the beginning of my time in Kalmykia. I also spent time with Okna Tsaganzam, the singer, and I met many Kalmyks who were really passionately trying to reclaim their nomadic identity. And for them my journey had a special meaning, of course, because in the 17th century, the Kalmyks, after the falling of the Jungar Empire, they fled west and settled on the Caspian Sea. But in the 18th century, in 1771, they came back again. But half of them died in Kazakhstan. And the route that I had ridden was the same route where maybe 100,000 Kalmyks had died.
Still you could see some remaining of those.
There's even some villages, one village I remember in western Kazakhstan called, in Kazakh, the place where we killed many Kalmyks.
Wow.
And the Kazakhs still remember the Kalmyks as their enemy in many ways. So you're probably getting to know now that everywhere I went, my journey meant something a little bit different.
Где-то Атитару, Атару, что за название в Казахстане? Атарау?
Атрау?
Атрау.
I went through Atrau.
Вы были там?
Был.
Где вы научились говорить по-русски?
Да, я в России учился. Да.
Учился где?
Ну, как я учился в Финляндии на самом деле. А потом я там вместе учился с русскими. И они начали меня научить, как говорить по-русски. А я помог им английский изучать.
У вас прекрасный акцент. Почти нету этого, знаете, у англичан есть определенный акцент. У вас этого нет.
Наверное, потому что я в деревнях основном изучал.
И вы монголдар вас ердик?
Монгол жохон митин.
Гэтэ зам
Сожаление плохо.
Okay. Let's go back to English.
But every time I meet my friends here, I come back and I say, "Malsuruk targan taftayu."
That's wonderful.
Or even I have a joke with my friends who live here. The Nago suruk targan taftayu. We have potatoes.
Please tell us about this. You are being the conveyor, tourism conveyor, the ambassador of Mongolia.
So I felt very strongly that even in places like Kazakhstan, Europe today, there's a big misunderstanding about nomad culture, and Mongolia in particular. It's very, very difficult for us, by us I mean settled Western people, to comprehend that the leader of the largest contiguous land empire in history, Genghis Khan, was a nomad. He grew up on a horse, he was illiterate, he lived in a ger all of his life. He didn't live in a castle, he didn't sit on a throne. And I think that for us that's very hard to comprehend. But what it does say is that there is much, much more to nomadic culture and nomadic history than just these myths about primitive barbaric people who came galloping in from the east, bent on destruction and so forth. There's much more to this story, and that's what I wanted to learn. And now I feel like that's the most important job that I have, which is to convey to people. Unfortunately, most people are still ignorant about nomadic cultures, not just in Mongolia but in Central Asia, to convey to them that this is a very rich culture, it's a very diverse one, and most importantly I think that nomadic culture has a very, very important message for the rest of the world.
That's the value we want to, Mongolia want to convey to Westerners, yet want to receive more tourists.
Yes.
And how do you see Mongolian tourism 5 years, 10 years from now?
Well, I think that every country has beautiful nature. You can go across the border into Russia, have similar landscape, or China. What no other country in the world has is your culture, the nomadic heritage, and perhaps most relevant for foreigners and tourists is the incredible harmonious and sustainable way that people live with the landscape. You know,
that harmony, okay.
The harmony, and that I think is what needs to be preserved and also taught and illustrated for tourists. Infrastructure is important with tourism in Mongolia, but I think it's not as important as valuing, protecting, promoting, and even celebrating this incredible connection that Mongolian people have with the land, their animals, and it's a model that we all need to learn a lesson from in a world where we are fast running out of resources, where we all need to live a little bit more sustainably. And we can't all live on the steppe, we can't all live like nomads, but we can visit here, tourists can come here, they can learn something and they can take something home that will change their lives and the lives of others for the better.
So let us celebrate this nomadic life, and in this celebration a role of a person like you is unvaluable, and I'm very happy to learn that you are now representing Mongolian tourism world, and you did a great job, and I would like to wish on behalf of my viewers all the best and good luck to you.
Thank you. Ich баярлалаа.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Хүн үзэгчтэй. Өнөөдөр манай дефактоны шүрдгийн зочноор Монгол улсын аялал жуулчлалын элч төлөөлөгч саяхан томилогдсон ноён алдарч жуулчин ноён Тим Көүп орлоо. Баярлалаа.
It's okay.
Хөөе ихнэр 9900 төгрөгөөр нэг сар сүлжээндээ хязгааргүй ярина гинүү. Тэгээд одоо би чам руу, аав руу, ээж рүү, хүүхдүүд рүү, найзууд руугаа бүтэн сарын турш хязгааргүй яриад байхад 9900 төгрөг төлөх юм уу? Дараа төлбөрт багц байж нэг жил нэмэлт хэрэглээгээ хийж болно гэж хэлэх гээд байна да тэгэхээр. За бол тийм багц байх ямар ч боломж байхгүй. Одоо ч тэгвэл нэртэйгэр нь арагчаагард манай галтгоонд хоол хийж байна гэж хэлчихэж.
Хосолсон төлбөрт хайбрид 9900 багц. Сүлжээндээ яриа хязгааргүй. Хайбрид 19900 багц. Сүлжээндээ яриа мессеж хязгааргүй. Бусад сүлжээнд 100 минут ярина.
Удахгүй утсаа лизингээр авна гэж боддоо.
Мобикон